you live near the water, it's easy to focus on today, the boat, the house, the lifestyle. But what does that look like 20 years from now? Because here's the thing, the home you buy, the mortgage you choose, the equity you build, those aren't just lifestyle decisions. They're financial decisions that shape your future. Hey everyone, I'm Tabitha or Tabby, the ILMrealtor, a local realtor here in Wilmington, North Carolina, helping you find your home between the river and the sea. Today we're talking about something that impacts every single homeowner: financial planning, retirement, and how your real estate fits into the bigger picture. And today we have someone who helps people connect all of those dots. Mike Breitfeller is a certified financial planner and the principal of the Breit Group here in Wilmington. After more than 15 years in the industry, he and his wife, Lauren, launched their own independent firm in 2025 to create a more personalized approach to wealth management, corporate retirement planning, and estate strategy. They've been Wilmington locals since 2005. They're raising 2 kids here, and they truly understand what it looks like to build a life and a financial future in Wilmington. Welcoming our guest, Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. So I guess what I really want to get started with is, what does a financial planner actually do?
Yeah, no, it's great question. And there probably is some variance across the board where it's like, hey, what do you do, or what do these firms do? I think in the simplest form, clients hire us or engage with us for one level of guidance and advice, and also really to help them not only formulate a plan that aligns with the things that are important to them, but also help them take action on those steps. So I think, it kind of in 3 stages. Initially, it's laying out, hey, what's kind of their vision? Where do they want to be? What are the ways that we would help them get there? And then how do we actually execute and make decisions so that it's not just a bunch of information?
That is the part that I always struggle with. It's like, I can make a plan, I can put everything in a row, but actually pulling the trigger on it, that seems a little scarier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the world we live in today, especially where, I mean, a lot of us use AI in every part of our life. And, I've used it before, and I think it's great for a lot of information. I think that final step of knowing, is that information exactly what I want to follow, or knowing how to vet the actual output and then move forward. I think, more and more, as a lot of industries become commoditized, I think, clients ultimately are hiring us for that final piece of green light on this strategy. Like, it's been vetted from the data side, from the human side. And when you kind of bridge those together, we're able to say, this is the right move and we should take action.
Yeah. I mean, AI is great, but I don't know if I want AI in charge of my retirement. That seems like I'm maybe giving it a little bit too much trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as like retirement, we live in the most beautiful area. I can't imagine finding anywhere else that I would rather retire. But what does that actually look like here in Wilmington? And specifically from like a real estate perspective, we got in here, we bought our home in 2021, right when we got those 3% interest rates. And how does that affect my retirement strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when clients think about retirement, it's like we all have, visions, dreams, different things throughout our life. But retirement is really supposed to be that final, like, hey, you've made it there, you're done working, and you really want to design a life that is exactly what you wanted it to be. And so for a lot of people, whether they're into, the beach, boating, or golf, this place we live in has a lot of those things. So it's like, I think it's always important to say, as you build out that vision, really, why do you want to be there? Like, what is, that purpose? And when you're answering it saying, hey, maybe I'm near family, or I'm near golf or beach, or whatever it is, the things that make you happy, I feel like that's the starting point of that plan. And it really allows you to reverse engineer everything else. Well, where am I buying that piece of real estate? Am I in a neighborhood with an HOA, or am I on, a bigger piece of land? Do I want a smaller place because I don't want to have to do any maintenance? Or do I want a place with extra bedrooms so that family could visit? So I think by taking the time up front to really, think about it, have that vision of, what does this look like? Who's coming to visit? What are we doing? I think that starts to help you get a real clear picture on what you're looking for. And I'm sure it helps you because then when, they're coming to you to say, "Can you help me?" They know what they're looking for versus I'm somewhere between a small condo and a waterfront deep water access. And you're like, well,
Why not?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
When we moved down here, it was with retirement in mind. We
Hmm.
wanted to take the right step for our family so we could be a little bit more financially secure and find somewhere that we could love, enjoy, and stay. So we actually had a financial planner up in Maryland before we moved down, and we went to him and said, "Hey, is this a good idea? Can we do this?" And he's like, "Yeah. Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, but now you said yes. Can we buy that like $1 million house now?" And he was like, "I mean, you could." But
Yeah.
again, reverse engineering that, well, where do you want to be? How do you want this to work out? And it's kind of a check and balance of helping you stay on track.
Absolutely. I think that's what, we like to early on be kind of part of the broader vision and dream and say, hey, don't leave anything off the table. Go big and lay it all out there. And then we start to rein it in and kind of prioritize, hey, what are the top items? What's most important? And I think by going through that exercise, whether it's retirement, real estate, career, life, it really reduces a lot of that, I don't want to say regret, but looking back and if I should have thought of that. So it's
Yep.
like we don't know what the future holds, but we can make some pretty good assumptions on, well, this could happen or this could happen. That's what builds confidence to say, this is the right decision and I'm going to move forward.
We moved down here. We're like, hey, can we buy that $1 million house? And he was like, probably not. And now my husband will reflect back and be like, we should have done it. We should have done it. Made the best decision based off of the information that we had at the time for our future. So am I going to regret that choice? No, I'm never going to regret being responsible with our money. So hindsight's 2020. Everybody always has the little things they would have done different. But so when it comes to the financial planning side of it with real estate, you hear the term like estate planning or estate basics. What does that mean for people who own in Wilmington or buying and selling in Wilmington? Kind of crack that egg open for me.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to think about the estate planning is simply at some point in the future, the assets that you have, where do you want them to go? Who do you want them to go to? And it's really just checking those boxes to say, okay, we've got these retirement accounts, these bank accounts, this real estate. Do we want this to go to our kids? Do we want it to go to our kids equally? Do we have, a business? Going back to the assumptions, the only two guarantees in life, death and taxes. It's like, so we do know,
100%.
those two things exist. But even for clients that are not retired, early on in life, as soon as you have kids, it's okay just to very quickly put that hypothetical thought on the table and say, what would happen? What would it
Hmm.
look like? And a really helpful exercise for clients, not only to check the boxes to make sure that you work with, an attorney, you have a basic will, durable healthcare power of attorneys, beneficiaries on all your retirement accounts, transfer on death on all your checking and savings accounts. But then if it's one or two children that are going to be the beneficiaries or executor, laying out that vision and just telling them. You don't have to get into specifics and say you're going to get, here's the total, our total net worth, but you can outline that, hey, if anything ever happens, this is kind of the protocol. This is who you would contact. And, it could be as simple as writing it on a piece of paper and putting it in a safe spot. Because at a difficult time, even clients that have done the best planning, sometimes their heirs just really have no clue of where to start. And so I think it's helpful to put together the plan that for what you want to have happen, but then also have some roadmap or at least some sort of clues for your heirs.
My husband and I travel all the time. We are one plane crash away from this needing to be
Yeah.
executed.
Yep.
So we've definitely had those conversations. It's been hard because some people are like, well, what are you going to do? And are the grandparents going to get the kids? Who's going to live in the house? And what we want is very different, I think, than what like my in-laws or my dad would think to execute on. And so it's like, I want my kids to stay in this house. If that's not on paper, that's going to be really complicated.
Absolutely. And I think one, big takeaway for all the listeners out there is whether it's financial plan, estate plan, what you're doing with your assets, I think it's really important to understand that you get to design it. So the world is flooded with rules and ideas and what works and what doesn't work. And there's so much noise out there. But sometimes people forget that it's like, hey, we do have some freedom in this life to make decisions that we want. And if you start there, you're not as worried. Like you might not have made the best financial decision, but if you made it because it was what was best for your family or for something else, that was still a great decision.
Don't land in that analysis paralysis phase. Like we
Correct.
need to at least make a choice. Might be the wrong one, but it's a choice that we get to make. That's a great transition into like risk tolerance. My husband and I are two different risk levels. I am the comfort zone. I don't care if we make a lot of money on this interest, and my husband's like, "Hey, like let's throw some over here and see if it lands big."
Yep.
So, what are your views on risk tolerance? Where do you suggest people? Is it at different age groups? Is it different fund money that you have laying around or retirement money that you have laying around? How does that
Yeah,
work?
absolutely. I think it's important to highlight like, hey, is this something we're discussing or doing together or separate? It's nice to kind of put that out there and you really try to find a level ground and alignment. And a lot of times you're able to do that by really carving out, and I like to use the term position sizing, because I think a lot of people, when they think about real estate, they might say, are we buying and going all in on this or not? And then when it comes to retirement, they're like, is now a good time to get into the market or not? Should we buy this company or not? And they're always thinking as all or nothing, And I think when you position size and kind of take some calculated risk, then overall you're not very risky. So when we look at risk tolerance, I think it's specific to the asset, the sleeve, the purpose, and you can be a very conservative investor that is taking a ton of calculated risk in little places, but as a whole, you're not really taking so much risk. Start with that, big picture in mind and start to reverse engineer it. What winds up happening is account by account, asset by asset, as you place these pieces, you're able to look at them and really have a better understanding of what the risk is. So if I'm speaking to a 30 or 40-year-old about their retirement account and they're not very risky, I'm still sharing the fact that that money needs to grow for the next 20 years. And our government tends to print 8 to 10% new money supply every year. You go to the grocery store, things are more expensive. So
Yes.
in the capacity of risk, it's almost riskier to sit in cash for 20 years, or not almost is. I believe it's riskier to sit in cash for 20 years than to be invested in equities. Now, if you just inherited a lump sum of money or sold a house, do you want to take that entire lump sum and just throw it in the market today? No, that might be too risky. It's like, hey, what's the purpose of this? What does this money or what does this asset need to do? How do we make sure it could do it with, the lowest amount of risk is necessary?
And that's
And
that reverse engineering again. Like, before we just throw it all in the market, what's the goal?
correct. A lot of times clients, they'll come, they're like, hey, what should I do with this money? And I usually ask them, I'm like, what is this money supposed to do for you? It's like, what do we want this to do? And, a lot of times, again, I'll hear stories of clients, they might have had a bad experience, the dot-com era or 08, 09 or, COVID. And, we don't know the direction of the market. We don't have any crystal ball. But what we do know is we have control of how much exposure we have to it. So it's okay to kind of take these assets or buckets of money and carve them up into smaller pieces. So you can have one investment account where a third of it is risky, and that's your long term 15, 20 plus years. A third of it is more, in the middle, trying to just generate some more income and interest, but, maybe not as much risk. And then one sleeve that's like, hey, if I want to take a trip, I got to fix a roof, I need a car, like it's there, it's available. And so when the market goes down, it doesn't change your life. It's like, well, what's changed? You still want to take a vacation? You still need to fix a roof? That money's there. You really just try to take a very methodical approach on the emotional input, or like the part that's important is what clients really care about and what they want to have happen. All the other pieces then become simple. It's like, I'm not questioning my recommendation because I spent a lot of time knowing what you want to do. So it's like these pieces fit. It's like, I don't know if the market's going to go up or down, but this is how you best position your assets. to accomplish what you just said was important.
When we're talking about like diversifying and, putting different money in different places, do you see that happening a lot, specifically in Wilmington, because we're kind of a beach town too, with like vacation properties or rental properties? I'm in the real estate field. My husband and I are trying to figure out business planning and structures and kind of what our next steps are. And for me, I'm really looking at starting to invest in properties. Can you break that up for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ties to that idea of all of these pieces are good. Let's really figure out where they fit. And, they're not making more land on the coast. There's not more waterfront unless, or at least not yet. So I think we are in a unique spot where there's a lot of demand, for the real estate in this area. I think there's a lot of good tax advantages to having investment properties. The cash flow is more important than they say cash is king, but it's cash flow is king. That's what allows you with good credit to borrow money, to take advantage of, interest rate spreads. And so again, I think if you have the ability to do both, that's usually the right answer. Whenever you have an acumen or background, like in your case, real estate, you're like, hey, this is my business. I see this. I understand it. I get stocks and I know that too. And I'm going to have that in my retirement accounts. But in your position, you have a better pulse on real estate. So for you to tilt a little more real estate versus equities, perfectly fine. And I would say, yeah, that probably makes more sense. I think you might be able to generate a better rate of return on that segment. Now, I wouldn't say go only real estate and don't ever hold, equities or hold cash. But I think that goes to that position sizing is where someone with no real estate background who's just like, hey, should I just do this? I might be like, well, let's see, let's make sure these boxes fit. But I think what a lot of people learn is they wind up buying one property. And if it works, then it's like, okay, we've built up some equity. We could buy another one and another one. And I've had clients build great real estate portfolios that are doing really well. It was able to deliver a similar or sometimes better, sometimes worse rate of return than equities. And they didn't get over leveraged. I think you always try to have backups, and the term I use a lot is a runway. So if you're going to buy a rental property and you can put a little money down, borrow from the bank, you're going to get someone in to rent it, whether it's short term or long term. On paper, you're going to be able to say, hey, this is a good investment because it's going to provide more income or growth than sitting in cash, and maybe the same or better than equities based on what I'm projecting. But we have to at least sit there and say, okay, worst case scenario, we get a hurricane, you're waiting on an insurance claim, you don't have a renter. How many months can you support, your primary house in this rental property? And you try to give yourself a 12 to 24 month runway in catastrophic scenarios. That's usually enough time for someone to say, hey, we could figure this out, markets will recover. And so I think some of the most successful investors or individuals are ones that take risk, but again, calculated risk. They're not just thinking about the upside. They're not just thinking about the downside. And for some clients, they're saying, I'll never invest in equities because they could go down, or I'll never invest in real estate because I saw what happened in 08, 09.
Yep.
The other side, they're saying, I only invest in equities because they only go up, and I only invest in real estate because it only goes up. And you try to just blend that. It's like assets, the dollar, really everything fluctuates over time, but not everything moves in the exact same direction at the exact same time. So you try to have different buckets, different, advantages, different tax strategy. And as I'm going through this, now it starts usually where it's like, okay, this is sounding complicated. It's like, no, but just starting in with that end in mind. And then what's going to happen is we're going to say that, hey, in retirement, this is the cash flow you want, or these are the amount of assets you'd want to have to support that. And we're just replacing investment property for one sleeve of the investment. So we didn't take more or less risk. Not only is it an investment property, but it might be an investment property that one day you retire in, or it might be an investment property that for 14 days a year you use and enjoy. If a client does not care about location, they don't want to be taking calls, they don't want to hire them, if they don't want to do anything in real estate at all and they don't care about where it is, then I'm going to lean towards you could buy a real estate investment trust. You could get real estate exposure
Yeah.
elsewhere without having to be part of it, but committed to spending a little time to it. I've been able to see clients that have been very successful in doing just that.
Yeah, that is exactly the kind of conversations that my husband and I need to be having together. But I also feel like that local side to it, like our financial advisors in Maryland, can he look at all of the stuff that's going on here in Wilmington? Sure. But when you have somebody who's local who has a better pulse on what's happening here and is watching their clients here, I feel like that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you know, we joke almost like, hey, we all live in this like little bubble. This area is awesome. And it really is. And I think it is helpful because you understand the financial side and the numbers, but also the non-financial side. Like there's a side to, you know, quality of living and picking where you want to be. And when I help clients with investments, I usually start there. You've got to start with the things that are most important to you. You know, it's hard if a client just says, my plan is I want to make as much money as possible. It's like, well, how much is enough? Where does
Yeah.
it end? Like, when does it ever stop? And is there ever a point to it? I'll spend a lot of time to vet them. So my first
Hmm.
instinct is always, if you're saying this is important and this is something you want to have happen, the mission is figure out how to make it happen. I really don't tell them it's a bad idea until I've exhausted every possibility. Eventually, that's the news you have to deliver. You know, they're trusting you to give them that guidance. For most clients, it's nice to be able to let them know there really is always a way. You know, it might not be how we're looking at it linear. There's a lot of ways by taking a step back and looking at where you are today, where you're going to be in the next couple of years, putting together a plan to say, yes, it is possible.
I love it. So the next thing that I want to do is kind of a weird terms that come with financial planning and no dumb question style. So,
Yes.
number one, and this is one of my favorite silly words in finance, but can you please explain fiduciary and why it is not an adjective for a person?
Yes. Yes. I know where you're going with that. And it comes up often. You know, fiduciary to really break down, it's the responsibility to act in someone's best interest, to make a decision that's prudent and again aligned with what's in their best interest. We are fiduciary advisors. I believe it's important. I also think that it's a standard that should be upheld in almost every industry.
It's
If I
in
go
our
to a
real estate
restaurant,
classes,
I hope my chef and waiter, I'm like, I hope they're fiduciaries when they're making my food. You know? You
right?
go to the doctor, it's like you really want everybody you engage with to have that level of responsibility. I think it's important to interview advisors, teams to make sure you align on the direction they're going. Not everybody's going to be a right fit for us, and we're not going to be a right fit for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want this person to explain to me how they're going to get me from point A to point B, what they're going to do to help me, how much they're going to charge me. And I want to really understand that. And it should be mutually agreed upon. It should be like, yes, if you're going to get me from A to B and provide those services, I'm happy to pay you this amount. And it should
Exactly.
feel like there was plenty of value in the most basic really explanation. It's, you want to be doing what's in your client's best interest, and the fiduciary standard is, presented to make sure that happens.
Yep. The real estate exam, it talks about our fiduciary responsibilities to our clients. I was in another like updating class the other day, and they were talking about how it's kind of part of that responsibility when you meet up with a client and you realize that you're not a good fit for them. And that might be personality wise, or you're just not seeing eye to eye, but it's not fair to them to not be able to give them the experience that they deserve and be the fiduciary that you need to be. So, what I'm hearing is fiduciary isn't a bad word. Another one that I'd love to go over is asset allocation. I feel like both of those words separately kind of make sense, but when we're talking about finance in general, what does that look like?
Yep, absolutely. Keep coming back to this common theme of start with this big picture. It's been said many times, just, own 30% real estate, 30% equities, 30% cash or bond, just a third, a third, a third. And across everything, that's always been kind of like, hey, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Asset allocation, you look at from your total holdings, you're saying, hey, what asset classes do I have? How much, again, real estate, equities, types of equities. In our world, a lot of times it's related to, we have this retirement account, this
Hmm.
okay. What should our asset allocation be? Like how much large cap, mid cap, small cap? And we really view it the same way of what's the purpose of this account? how much risk do we want to take for an expected return? And it really helps you decide how much you should have in each asset class. It's not a direct correlation, but a lot of times you hear more risk, more return. And that can be true in a lot of standpoint, but there's also a lot of scenarios where the more risk really didn't deliver enough more return to make it worth it. So for most of our clients, if they can target a certain rate of return with a little bit less risk, they prefer that than just a little more return with a lot more risk. This wouldn't be my advice to say everyone ChatGPT, but if you put it in chat and said, hey, what's an appropriate asset allocation as a starting point? It's going to break down and you can say why. And it's going to tell you so you can start to learn and be comfortable with it. More and more these days, some of the asset classes move at the same speed, same direction.
Hmm.
So it's important to pay attention to say, hey, if I'm diversifying, I want to make sure I'm diversifying for the purpose of reducing risk, not just different types of investments that are all doing the same thing.
Yeah. If you put all of your eggs in one kind of basket and there's a default in the basket, you can still break all of your eggs
Yeah.
versus 12 different styles of basket.
Yeah.
There you go.
Correct.
So we talked about this briefly. Should I consider using my 401k to buy investment properties? If we're going to talk about real estate specific.
The first question or the first thing I look at when someone says 401k to do another investment where it's outside the 401k is, how old are you? If you're over 59 and a half, it starts to look more attractive because you don't have that possible 10% penalty. So you're always looking at what is the cost of capital. The cost of capital to take your money out of a 401k while you're working is 25% taxes plus a 10% penalty, maybe more.
It
That puts you
hurts.
in
It hurts so much.
it starts to hurt, and it was really expensive cost to capital. Whereas perhaps I can put a smaller down payment and finance this, property. And it's like, what do you want to pay? Interest or taxes? And I'm like, I don't like either. I just want to pay whichever is going to be less. I've seen clients do like a 60-day rollover where they took money out of the account, got financing, and then put it back. So, they didn't have
That's
to pay
wild.
a tax or a penalty because they returned it. And so that was, good use to bridge a gap. But, to just liquidate a retirement account, pay a big chunk of tax, I don't know that you really see as much of the advantage when you go that route.
Yeah. If you're looking for the return, it's going to have to be a really great investment property and years down the line to potentially see a net zero on that.
That's correct. I think it's, deal specific, individual specific, and I think you just always have to include all the pieces on the table when you're trying to put together the puzzle.
I'm one of those people. I got in with my 3% interest rate, sitting pretty. Should I stay here forever? Am I allowed to ever sell this house? Because it feels irresponsible.
Yeah. So, when you got in with those cheap interest rate, it does feel good because you're like, wow, it was like free money. Like, inflation's running at a higher rate. There's always that financial component, and then it's kind of that life priority component. So what you try not to do is you try not to make lateral or negative move. You get out of a 3%, you wind up finding something that wasn't exactly what you wanted. You paid a higher interest rate and you feel like you're already looking for that next move.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're at a low interest rate and you find the next place that you believe to be your forever home or a really good opportunity and you look at that, there's a cost to this decision, but when you net it all out, that cost might be $10,000 a year. Okay, well, that's a lot of money, but if $20,000 is worth it for you to move and have this other spot that maybe it's closer to things you like to do, or maybe it's kids' school, or maybe it's closer to work and saves you time from traveling. A lot of times you could find different things to justify and it's not a bad move.
Mm-hmm.
So to do it just to do it, it's like, well, no, that it's not going to be our gut reaction to say get out of that 3% mortgage. When you can, say that, hey, this is something that moves me closer to where I want to be or today or in the future, then I think it's okay. Interest rates tend to all be relative. Try not to focus on just that one component of interest rates. So I think you do want to take a look at it and include all the considerations, and that's what helps you understand if it's the right decision. Because if you only focus on the interest rate or the debt, you might be losing something else. it almost ties into, should I pay off my debt and then invest? It's like, no, you probably want to be doing both at the same
Doing both.
time, because, interest rates have the ability to fluctuate, to change. The value of your dollar has the ability to go up and down. I think it's difficult because in the course of our life, we think about money as its value today. What can it do today? But if we look back 10, 20 years ago, look at how much of a difference it was. So while you want to minimize high interest debt, while you don't want to just be, leveraged where it's causing you stress and you can't
Hmm.
support it, the same point in this game of life or this game of money, you do want to build assets. You want to build assets that could produce cash flow and income. And that's what will allow you to retire when you don't have a paycheck.
Yep. We had a conversation about, do we pay off the house? Do we pay off a car? And then we sat down and we put it in order of what had the highest interest rates. I mean, our house has the lowest interest rate, so it doesn't make sense for us to put money towards our house. But that mindset is very different than what a lot of people's like Dave Ramsey books taught them, 10 years ago, which is just funnel it into the debt, funnel it into the debt. It's not a terrible idea, but there are other things that can sometimes be more important. So,
Absolutely. And if you have a retired couple and they've got 30,000 left on their mortgage, they just want to have no mortgage in retirement. Sure, I've seen scenarios where financially it didn't make sense, but I just knew it was like something that was
it would
going to
make them
provide
feel
them
better.
with so much joy. I was like, go for it. It's like, big deal. Now you have no mortgage. You get to say, I have no mortgage. Great. And I support that. So it's like, I'm not an all or nothing, but to your point, it wouldn't make sense to pay off the lowest interest rate, have high interest rate, or, suspend investments in other assets like real estate
Hmm.
or equities that, are likely to grow at a higher rate than your mortgage. And that's really what, larger corporations and tax strategists look at. Is there arbitrage? If I could borrow money at 3 and earn 6 to 8, it made sense to borrow versus using my own money. There's people with tremendous net wealth that still borrow because of the arbitrage. They don't have to. They could buy everything cash, but when they're able to use another institution's money, it boosts their return. So I think you try to just really look at everything together and vet it. And then, is it good for me for what I'm trying to do?
What I've realized is that not everybody has a math brain like me. So I have some friends and I was trying to help them like figuring out their cash flow and what they could afford on a house before they were really, really looking.
Mhm.
And it turned into this, oh, well, if you just, blah, 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 and my brain went on fire and they just sat there and kind of stared at me a little blankly. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, got it. So I would recommend if anybody is listening to this and being like, I got lost, I don't understand, what is arbitrage?
Yeah.
I would reach out to
Yeah.
you and get that ball rolling, because the sooner you start, I feel like the sooner you end up seeing returns, because anytime you put time and energy towards something, you're going to get some kind of return out of it, even if it's peace of mind.
Absolutely. I think that everyone will see an advantage or value by going through that sort of exercise. Just, write it on a piece of paper, start with the vision, and it really simplifies what can seem complex when you just break it down. And then you feel good and you want to follow it because you're like, hey, this is getting me towards what I want to have happen versus being reactive to all the elements around you.
Yep. Nothing worse than being reactive. Well, thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful. I hope everybody took away at least something, even if it's just to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, start talking to me about diversifying
Yeah.
funds.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
we appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. And I will look forward to speaking again. Take care.
If you're thinking about making Wilmington your home, or you already live here and want to make sure that your real estate decision actually supports your long-term financial goals, send me a DM on Instagram at the ILMrealtor. And if you're looking for a financial planner who understands Wilmington families and the coastal lifestyle, check out Mike with the Breit Group. Thanks for hanging out with us, and I hope to see you around our perfect little city.